Hello and welcome to Beginning Synthesis on Free Software. This is episode 4, Polyphony, Oscillators and Filters. So first, what is Beginning Synthesis? Well, Beginning Synthesis is a series where I take you through the basics of subtractive synthesis using only free software. Though I demonstrate with Ardor and Odin, it is not an Ardor and Odin tutorial, but rather a tutorial that you should be able to apply to other synthesizers. So far we've talked about the basic structure of the synthesizers, the oscillators, filters, LFOs, envelopes. Today we're going to experiment using the third oscillator and the third filter. Worth noting that a lot of synthesizers don't actually have 3 filters, they only have 1. Additionally, we'll discuss something about polyphony. So first, you may note that I have unmuted the third track here. The third track is a polyphonic track, so far we've only been using these synthesizers in a monophonic mode. Monophonic meaning capable of playing a single note at a time. So let's bring up Odin. I've made an initialized patch here and you will see it is in polyphonic mode. Polyphonic means capable of playing more than one note at a time. That has some implications which I'd like to describe. First, let's play the sequence. Extremely bright and extremely harsh because instead of just one note at a time playing, we've got, I don't see any 4 notes, so up to 3 notes playing simultaneously. This makes for a very loud and brash sound, which we're going to tame. But first, I want to explain what polyphony means. This display that you see of the oscillators, the filter, the amplifier, the envelopes, almost all of this is repeated as many times as there are voices. So each voice will behave just like when we were in monophonic mode. The reason I say almost is there are a couple of features which are slightly different, which we will get onto in due time. But for now, it's important to remember that we have multiple instances of what you see. So let me jump straight in and open up 3 oscillators here. Now, I'm thinking that playing 3 saw waves is going to be very, very harsh and abrasive, given that 1 saw wave played polyphonically was 2. I might look to play these in different registers, so I'm going to make a decision here. I'm going to tune this second oscillator up by a 5th, which is 7 semitones. I'm going to tune the third oscillator down by an octave, and I'm going to turn those volumes down initially because we're going to bring those up by ear. Secondly, typically the higher frequency, the higher pitch something is played, the more abrasive it sounds. So I'm going to have the highest pitch, which is the 5th, playing a triangle wave, which is a softer waveform. The oscillator that's playing on pitch, I'm going to have a square wave, which is slightly less abrasive, and the one playing below, I'm going to have as a saw wave. This is just a guess based on my intuition. We'll obviously come back and revisit this. So let's play. So we can only hear the square wave because the others are turned down. Let me turn up the 5th. That is, oops, I should turn up the 5th that's above. One of the things with a 5th is if you think about a scale on the circle of 5ths, it's a sequential series of notes, which means that if you play any of the notes except the one at the end, the 5th will also be in the scale. So a 5th is a fairly safe interval, but there is a note which will be pulled out of the scale. So sometimes if you have that 5th too high, it will sound a little bit too dissonant. And I'm quite happy with that tone. Now I'm going to adjust the third oscillator, which is the sub oscillator, the one an octave below, again by ear. So you can hear that we've got a pretty full tone, especially when we're playing in chords. I'm going to turn drift on. Again, this is something that you would normally look at after the fact and try and tweak, but I just want to put it in place now. Additionally, this is sounding very loud, so what I think I'm going to do is adjust the gain in the LFO. So the LFO is where all of these are being routed. Sorry, that's not an LFO. The low pass filter is where all of these are being routed, but if I adjust the gain, the overall volume will sound like it drops. So that just avoids it being as loud as it was. Now we'll go to shaping the sound. As we've been doing previously, we'll use the amplifier envelope to shape this. I'm gonna go straight for something that's a little bit plucky, so very short attack, quite a long decay, a not so long release, and sustain near zero. Let's just listen and we can tweak. See what happens if we were to increase that sustain level. I think that's pretty nice. I like having a little sustain so the notes don't die out to zero, especially when I have chords where some notes are held for longer. If I had no sustain, those notes would fall silent, so I want to balance this out. Next, I'm going to do some tuning with this low-pass filter. One thing that I would suggest is to try the different filter types. Some of these are modeled off of various physical synthesizers as opposed to just more naive or straightforward implementations. The cone, formant, and ring modulator are slightly different, and I won't really go into detail about those for now, but if you are following along, then by all means experiment. I'm going to switch to the 12 decibel per octave filter for the polyphonic use because I prefer the softness that it brings. Now I'm going to just arbitrarily turn up some keyboard tracking. Normally you would do this by ear, but I'm doing this for brevity. And now I'm going to tune this frequency parameter. So let's listen. So I think that frequency is low enough that it tames that high end. Now we're going to bring up a filter, and I think the filter I'm also going to have plucky. I'm going to almost model it after the filter that we have on the amplifier. And I'm then going to tune the sustain to taste. So I'm going to start it playing, and I'm going to adjust how much that filter envelope adjusts the filter cutoff frequency. Now let's adjust the sustain level. Okay, so I think the sustain level is working okay there. Again, when designing sounds, you have a sound in mind and you make these adjustments to bring what you hear closer in line with what you imagine. For now, I'm demonstrating the features and how you might use them. So what I think I might do is use a high-pass filter again and make it keyboard track. But what I'm going to do is turn up the resonance. So the resonance, remember, reinforces a certain frequency. So I'm going to see if we can use that as a tool to bring up the bass. If we don't have it keyboard tracking, then it will be a fixed frequency, which will be a resonance. And a resonance here is probably not what we want, like a room resonance. We want a resonance which is musically associated with the sound. So let's turn keyboard tracking to maximum. So that means this frequency is going to be relative to the notes that are playing. And remember, it's polyphonic. There is one of these for each of the notes. So let's play and let's tune this. But first I'm going to turn the resonance up so we can listen to it more clearly. I should have looked at. So you can hear it almost sounds like an additional oscillator playing. try and bypass this. You hear how much more full the low end sounds. So I have this tracking high pass filter, but in particular, the resonance of the filter is amplifying frequencies in the low end. You couldn't do this with a regular EQ because the equalizer would be at a fixed frequency, but this is per voice and this is tracking the pitch. This is useful for enhancing the bass and sounds. I'm going to tune the resonance on the low pass filter, so the sound, remember, is all three oscillators into the low pass filter, into the high pass filter, into the amplifier. So I'm going to listen for the resonance here. So you can hear the sort of motion of the filter there. I think that's too strong. Now let's experiment with the saturation. So the saturation is a form of distortion. We can saturate in both of these, so let's try. Saturation is also bringing gain. So I'm going to saturate here, and then I'm going to turn the gain down here. And then I'm going to saturate here. Hear that the nature of the saturation sound is not the same in both of the filters, and when you move to the modeled filters you'll discover that the saturation is even different. So I think that's working quite well. I'm gonna just drop in a fraction of velocity sensitivity because we already know how that works. We could use the mod envelope, but I don't think we need it for now. What I think I'll do then is add the third filter. So one of the difficulties with using this third filter sometimes is the third filter is coming after the amplifier. So firstly, it has quite a different character in the way that it adjusts the sound and responds to loud and quiet signals. But also, it's difficult to know whether to keyboard track it or not. So what I think I might do with this one is I'm just experimenting with a band pass here. So what a band pass does is, where a low pass sets the low frequencies through and a high pass lets the high frequencies through, a band pass lets frequencies within a certain frequency band through. So let's try and have this key track. Not fully. So when it's not fully key tracking, it means that as the keyboard pitch goes up, the filter frequency lags behind it, and when it goes down, it lags behind. So full tracking is this, no tracking is this, move those the wrong way, tracking is this, full tracking is this, and partial tracking is this. Some also allow you to go beyond 100%. So I've got some keyboard tracking in. So I use the resonance to help me hear where the filter cutoff is placed. What's happening though is that we're losing a lot of the frequency around. So you see here it's very full, and it's quite narrow. One thing you may note is that these two filters, we can select which oscillators pass through the filters. I haven't actually done anything with that, but that's possible. This one only operates on the output of the amplifier, so it's a little bit more limited in that regard. So what I think I'll do is to add a bit more motion to the sound, I'll take an LFO, so LFO1, and I will have it adjust the band pass filter's cutoff. So filter 3 is frequency. So I set it to an exaggerated amount. It's too fast now. I'm going to set it fast so we can hear it. Now I'm going to tame the frequency. the reasons that I went for that motion is because the bandpass is cutting away the high and the low end. If I have the bandpass moving, it picks up some of that resonance I introduced with the high pass filter in the bass, and it picks up some of the frequencies which are still available from the low pass. So when I animate this back and forth, it gives me some capacity to retain the harmonics that I've created. When you have it moving fast, that's quite a different timbre. It may be something you want, it may be something that you don't. One thing I didn't mention, I suppose, is LFOs are what are called bipolar modulation, meaning when the LFO touches the frequency, it can both increase it and decrease it. In contrast, envelopes are unipolar modulations. That means it will only increase or only move it in one direction. So this envelope control, I can say that the filter envelope will increase only, or it will decrease only, depending whether I turn it clockwise or anti-clockwise. So a negative value means decrease it, a positive value means increase it. Let's have one last listen. I think I'm happy with that, and I think that goes to illustrate the possibilities of using 3 oscillators and 3 filters all together. One of the things that's missing here with respect to what you will often hear in produced music is effects. And effects are one of the things that we will come back and look at in the next episode. In any case, I'd like to say thanks for joining me for the series. I hope you'll join me for the remaining episodes, but whatever you do, thank you very much for joining me today, and goodbye.